Hello, welcome to our podcast. Join with me again, the great and legendary Chris Jackson. And this episode's a very interesting one. We have transfers and players transferring from schools and all that stuff, and the effect it has on not only academics, but athletics as well. Chris, what are your thoughts on the transfer portals and the new regulations and all that stuff, like around all of it?
I love the ability that people can transfer because of what goes on. And I mean, a lot of times coaches, they recruit a kid, then right at signing day, when that kid hits the pen to paper, all of a sudden that coach is gone for another school. And a lot of times you pick a school because of that relationship with the coach. I know there's more factors now with NIL and there's education, but there's so many different things, but that relationship's such a big part. So I love it. And I love how players can transfer and put their names in the portal and not lose eligibility. It's a big thing because the way it's trending, it's almost like pro sports with that. If a coach can just leave in the middle of the night, which I've seen a lot of times, and not tell anybody, a lot of times, why can't a player? But the one thing is just there's really no regulations, unfortunately. You've got regulations, you've got guidelines in pro sports, but college sports where it's still, right, college sports is what it's called. We're not calling it pro sports. There's still no regulations, no guidelines. And I think the best way to phrase it is that it's like the wild, wild west. There's pretty much the NCAA is not enforcing anything. So what's the kid in the school going to do if there's no enforcements? Anyone can do whatever they want. And maybe that's not the player's fault. That's not coach's fault. That's just there's no rules. There's no regulations. And until there are things enforced, what's anybody going to do about this?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the thing that really sucks nowadays is like back in the day, you would have to sit a season before you could play. Now, if you transfer, you can basically start right away. And I think that now you can transfer pretty much anytime you want, and there's really not as much of a decision or as much thought put into it, knowing that you can play. But now I think back in the day when transfers were a rare thing because you'd have to think about it more. So, yeah, I think it's definitely a tough topic. It's very, I don't know. I think it's tough because you see that it affects the player's growth. If a player's sitting a season, then they really have to think about, do I want to leave or do I want to stay? But if they can play right when they get there, then it's easy. They can definitely do it and not think about it too much. And it's just an interesting situation.
Yeah, the problem with it is a lot of these players aren't finding new homes when they go into the portal. Or sometimes you wonder where the advice is coming from, or do you have a goal when it comes into, are you just putting yourself in the portal, or what's the reasoning why? But I think you got to look into the reasons too. Just ESPN put this out back on April 25th exactly, was from the years of 2020 and 2021, only 54% of FBS players who entered the transfer portal found enrolled at a new school. So
that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's like nearly half of kids that go into the transfer portal are not finding a new home to play football.
And that affects everything because they're also going to school too, and they have classes and they have their academics, and it's like if you transfer, you're also changing schools and you have to change your classes, and it's like it's a lot of stuff that you're affecting. If you leave a school, you're not just changing sports teams. You're changing schools. You have to, your credits have to transfer over. And it's like, why are all these kids transferring that much if they know that they're going to have to change classes and they know they're going to have to do all this stuff outside off the like in the classroom as well? It's just very tough. It's a lot of sacrifice. It's a lot of stuff that you have to think about. It's just very tough.
It is, because not every school is going to have the same credits. Not everything transfers over. A lot of times, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but I would envision it's 60, 70% of things even transfer over credits wise if you transfer once. And what if you transfer twice in a 4 or 5 year span? I know a lot of times that second transfer, like what JT Daniels did, was after he graduated from Georgia, then he found his third school, right? So but that's a tough thing you've got to deal with. You've got to figure out the off the field stuff. And I know everybody's got NFL dreams, but what's the percentage of people that actually make it to the NFL and make a career in the NFL? The average life expectancy is maybe 3 or 4 years at that level, if that.
That's about 3.
After that, you're going to want to find something else to do. Heck, maybe your major wasn't coaching. Maybe you find something in athletics with sports management or something else. But I know you want to put everything into plan A, but if you get hurt, God forbid you get hurt or something else happens,
Yeah.
a lot of things can go wrong.
And like you said in the NFL, right? I think the only way it's worth transferring is if you know that you might have a shot at the pros and you feel like whatever school you attend next is going to help you get to that place, right? But if you're not going to be in the in the pros, why risk it? Like, why risk leaving a school knowing that you have to change all these classes, knowing that you might not start, knowing that you're going to have to basically learn under a new coach, you're going to have to learn a new playbook? Like, why do it if you know that you might not make it that to the pros? Like, it's just not worth it, is it? Like, is it really something to really do if you're not going to go pro, if you don't feel like that you're going to, like, knowing it's going to affect everything else in your life? Like, that should be a thought.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times too, I think you need to really think through every single thought of transferring before your name gets into that portal. Because once you're in the transfer portal, you might not find a new home, and that school doesn't have to take you back once you're in the portal. They don't. Oklahoma technically didn't have to take back Caleb Williams, and they didn't. They got Dylan Gabriel from Central Florida. Where did Caleb Williams end up going? USC. Maybe it works out for both parties because Caleb didn't want to be there with a new coach, but you need to think it through. Is if the culture is that bad, if things just aren't working out, you're not happy, you maybe you've been lied to in the recruiting process, heck yes. I think it's the perfect opportunity. Find a different home. If you have to move down a level, go ahead. If you just want to play, go ahead and find somewhere to play. The biggest thing to me, at least, is I think so many times you go to a school, you think you're going to play right away. Well, that's not how it usually works in life. You don't just get a job and you're the boss immediately. Right? That's very rare circumstances where that happens. How is that going to happen where you go to a Big 12, Pac-12, SEC, Mountain West school, and you're a true freshman, and right away you're starting or getting significant playing time? Sure, you might get reps out there, but you can't expect to be that first team guy right away. I love those high expectations for yourself, but you've got to have some patience and develop your game and be ready mentally and physically, because that college athletics lifestyle is a whole different beast.
Yeah. And now that poses the question, though. Do we want to go back to the age where you had to sit a season before you could play? Like, the fact that Caleb left to go to USC, should he have to sit, or like not have to sit, but imagine if he had to sit a season? Do you think he still would have followed his coach to USC knowing he couldn't play this in 2022, especially since I think he has a shot at going to the NFL if he has a good 2022 year?
Like,
so
I mean,
we'll
I believe before this, even if your coach left, you were able to transfer and not lose eligibility and not lose a year. So Caleb would have been okay, but
yeah.
So if there's those guardrails in place, maybe that impacts the decision, because do you really want to lose out on a year now? Maybe with his talent, that doesn't matter. Everyone knows who Caleb Williams is now, right? For that draft class, he's going to be a top 5 pick. I imagine if he's not, I'd like to meet who else is ahead of him, especially at the quarterback spot. But it's going to be a tough decision to make if those guardrails aren't in place. I don't think they should be in place, at least for your first transfer.
Yeah.
I think that's sometimes maybe it's just not it. The coaching staff just tells you one thing. I know a lot of times they tell you one thing, you get there, it's a whole different experience. Or the position coach that recruited you left at signing day, or after a year they leave. A lot of different circumstances, but
Yeah.
it's there's so many things you got to think about. And I don't know if transferring is always the solution at the end of it. I think anyone in college, at one point in your mind, whether you're an athlete or not, it just kind of comes in your head, God, it's just not working out right now. Maybe I need to transfer. I think everyone's gone through that at one point, but you stick through it, right? I'm glad I never did, because I think it just makes you tougher. I think a lot of times you just build those relationships that last forever. That's not to say people that transfer aren't making a good choice for them. You got to do what's in the best interest of yourself. But a lot of times, at least sometimes, I don't think the whole entire thought process and the whole entire process, pros and cons, is being thought out before you do that.
I think there probably has to be a cap on transfers as well. Like, I don't think a player should be allowed to transfer more than once or twice, because after that, it gets to a point where you're really just messing everything up. You're going to a third school. If you haven't graduated yet, you're scrambling on that. You're learning from another coach, another system. It's just like, after that, I think it becomes a burden. And I do think, just for the players' you know, in the purposes of their development as players and people, I think they should have a cap at 1 or 2, especially since they don't have to sit. I think that they should definitely have a cap, because if they don't have to sit and they can play right away, I think it allows them to experience a second school quicker, and then they can assess their situation and say, if I want to stay or go. But I do think there really needs to be a cap, because the fact that the NCAA is not regulating a whole lot, it affects everything, right? It means a player can go as many times as they want. And I think it affects it because then it makes it harder to really know who the talent is in recruit, knowing that guys are going to leave and don't know who's going to stay or come in the following year. So I think there definitely needs to be more of a regulation in terms of caps on amount of transfers you're allowed in a career.
Now, there's supposed to be that rule in place to where you're allowed a one-time transfer without penalty, without losing a year of eligibility. But again, what did I say at the start of this whole podcast? Are there rules? I don't think there are. And until there's rules, we're going to all operate by the assumption there are no rules. The NCAA has shown that time and again, it doesn't matter. And even maybe that second time you try to transfer. Now, it's different, of course, if you're going to be a graduate transfer and that's your second transfer. At that point, that rule is not in effect. You've got that degree, you've got all that stuff in place. Now you're maybe going somewhere else for your master's program, but also to get another year and maybe chase those NFL dreams that you've got, like what JT Daniels has done. But again, there's not going to be rules in place that I don't see anything in the future. But even if there are, again, what if somebody transferred for a second time as an undergraduate student athlete and the NCAA says no? Well, what if they bring in a lawyer? I know we saw that with Tate Martell before there was even Tate Martell, Justin Fields, all these guys, before there was even, you can get 1 year of eligibility, that transfer, I should say, for free. They brought in lawyers and then boom, what happens? Justin Fields is eligible at Georgia. Tate Martell is eligible at Miami. I know Martell ended up at UNLV at the end, is doing different stuff now, and Justin Fields is in the NFL, but what if somebody just brings a lawyer and then what? And then, right. There's so many things that happened with him through all these different circumstances. And then somebody could just hire a lawyer. And then what does the judge say? What happens in the law, I guess, in the court process? What happens there? And what if then all of a sudden, if one person's allowed to transfer for a second time as an undergraduate, that's going to spill the beans and anyone else can do that too?
How do you recruit a player now, knowing that the transfer portal is like an unregulated thing? Like you recruit a kid, and then like he can transfer anytime he wants, and players can just transfer in and out. Like it just makes your job as a coach that much more difficult, knowing you have to just recruit differently, or not even differently, but like pray to God that your players stay, and that it's hard to just it's hard as a coach. You see all these guys leave. It's like I imagine as a coach in the 2020s, seeing your players come in and out and leave. It's like, what the hell am I doing wrong? It just makes it harder. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of programs that were concerned about the amount of transfers they lost, but you've got to think too, how many schools lost a lot of transfers. Just go through the numbers. Even if you've got a few more than other schools, I wouldn't freak out about that. It's right now, of course, it's the early part. As things slow down and more of these numbers come out about finding homes, maybe eventually a middle ground is going to have to be found. When is it found? I don't know. It might be found in the next year. Do I think it will? I highly doubt that. You've just got to figure that stuff out. And if you're a college coach, you bring up a good point. Something I've heard is you got to recruit them when they're on your campus too. It's a nonstop recruiting battle to keep them. Then now you've got staffers dedicated to recruiting the transfer portal and scouring through the transfer portal all day, seeing who's available. Do they fit us? Let's reach out now that they're in the portal. There's so many different things. And how do you think the University of Pittsburgh felt when Jordan Addison, their top receiver, top prospect, left Pitt and then went to USC? There was that rumor for a few days that he was going to leave. Then there was a rumor maybe USC. Obviously that played out the way it was reported and it's supposed to go. How do you think Pitt felt though? Especially that coming out, late springtime, their top guy all of a sudden is going to USC. And the report from ESPN was Pitt wasn't too happy. They thought that he was tampered with, all these different things. And even if someone's tampered with, and I know you can't legally contact them until their name's in the portal, but who's enforcing tampering too?
Yeah.
At this point, can I blame college coaches for tampering? No, I cannot, because there's no rules in place until the NCAA shows anything and gets somebody in trouble. it's the wild, wild west, and nothing's going to change.
I hate to say it, but I think COVID's done a huge number on transfers because if a player can't do an official, right, makes it so hard for them to actually see the campus like they really would like. Like they can't meet with a coach and go through step by step everything, the program's, dream and like what the coach wants out of the players and all that. It's hard to like really judge a program on an unofficial because it's like you're seeing the school, yeah, but you're not really taking that in-depth look on the program or the school itself if you're doing an official. So that's why transfers are a big thing, because a player gets to a school and they're like, oh, this isn't what I thought. Well, yeah, you didn't take an official. So it's like, I think the whole COVID thing and not being able to schedule officials definitely a reason why we're seeing a lot of transfers come in, a lot of transfers now, because I think with COVID and not like, and like I said, like it's so hard to know if you fit into a team or a school without really getting that guided experience and that like step by step, like getting to meet the team and seeing the facility and meeting with the coaches and all that stuff. So it definitely is a huge factor in that, I think.
And I think you got to be patient with the process too. I know a lot of times there's pressure to commit right away, but do you have to, if you have so many different offers, find the right place for you, visit somewhere. I don't want you to commit somewhere, then you realize that's not the right decision. Just vet
Yeah.
through the process. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. That sounds so cliche with relationships, career, friends, family, everything else. But as you get older, you're going to learn those things you're told, those things are pretty damn true. Be
Yeah.
patient with that. Don't get pressured. Take those official visits. Enjoy that. And biggest thought you should have, do I see myself living here for the next 3, 4, or 5 years?
Yep.
Do you see yourself on weekends in the off season hanging out there, going to those restaurants, hanging out with friends? Does it seem like a cool place I can just spend? Does it seem like a place where I can accomplish my dreams, get my degree, and maybe accomplish those dreams too?
Yeah. No, I
It's got to be
definitely.
so much. Don't feel the pressure of, I know there's so much pressure put on. Well, there's only just so many spots. Okay, well, I
Yeah.
need
No,
to
I
commit. I
agree.
don't want to lose that scholarship, but be
Yeah.
patient with it. And now that now that the NCAA is not enforcing that scholarship limit, at least for this year, because COVID, as portals changed so many different scholarship numbers. Be patient with it. It's
Yeah.
your decision. It's not anybody else's. Heck, if Miami's right, but you don't know, but you want to see other schools, go ahead. But then maybe Miami turned out to be the right school. Same with Cal Poly, anywhere. It's your process. Don't feel pressured by the outside with social media, or because I know there's a lot of pressures with that too. Everybody talks about social media pressures. Oh, great. Their life on Instagram looks great. Well, everybody's life on Instagram looks great. The graphic looks great, but figure out where is good for you for 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, and like you said about pressure, like if you see all these players say like, "Oh yeah, I got an offer from Alabama and Florida and all these schools," and they have their family and their pals say, "Yeah, go to Alabama or whatever," blah blah blah, and they pressure them to pick a school, and then they pick that school, and it's like I don't, it's not a good school for them, and then they transferred. It makes sense. Like nowadays, there's so much pressure put on these kids to pick the school that their friends and like all them want them to go to because they're a fan of that school. It's like, well, it should be the school that the player sees themselves at, not the school that their family and friends want to root for. So it's like, why are you putting the pressure on the kids to pick a school when it should be their decision only? Where do they see themselves? Is the coaching staff right for them? Is a school a good place for them? Like I think, like you said, social media is a big part of that. Now that it's grown, there's definitely a lot more transfers because it's a big thing now, and everyone's life, especially if they're a 5-star, is put under a microscope, and they're put in the situation where they can be seen no matter what they do. So it's very hard to be them sometimes, and I do think you have to be patient, but I do think that the pressure needs to be pulled back a bit so that the players can make a decision based on what they actually want in their mind,
And who's going to be happier when they come home for a winter break?
Yeah,
Someone that's
absolutely.
actually getting their opportunities at school and they're enjoying that setting, they're enjoying their classes, their friends, and they're actually maybe getting fun reps, and it's a good culture. And it's a place you really wanted that just fit you. You're going to be happier than somebody that's at Alabama, and I love Alabama. I love Nick Saban. I know why you want to go there, but a fourth stringer that looks like they're never going to play there.
Yeah,
Who's going to
no,
be happier coming back? Maybe that is what you want, but if you there's nothing like playing. There's nothing like getting that experience. And I think a lot of times we need to take advice, but don't let that force your decision. I know I hate to say this, most parents are phenomenal, but I know we've seen it where parents
Yeah,
run the kids' recruiting process, and that sucks to see.
that's
Give
horrible.
them
Yeah,
all the advice, give the kid all the advice in the world. That is for, you're the parent. I'm not going to tell you how to parent, but don't base your decision because your parents want you to go there. Make the
see,
decision because you want to go there. Take their advice. They've been around the block, right? There's a reason why they're your parents. They've had a lot of different experience, but just take the advice and then weigh all your options and then make the decision where you know you're going to be happy. Don't worry about the damn graphic because by the time you're 35, nobody's going to care about that graphic you put on Twitter when you were 17 years old. At that point, you're going to be like, oh, that was a cool experience, but it was just a graphic on Twitter.
see, I don't care how old you are. I don't care if you're 16 or 17 or whatever. I don't care how old you are. If you are the one being like picked and recruited, you need to run your own show, right? You cannot have your mom or your dad do it. You need to be the one to run it because mom and dad are not going to a school. You are. You're the one playing for the team. You're the one being coached. You're the one that's hoping to play. So you need to run your own show, and you need to just. It's very hard, like you were saying, right? You need to like really sit back and realize that you are in charge of you. And I think that transfers, a lot of these kids, like the transfer portal is so big now because a lot of these kids pick schools not where they actually want to go, but where they're pressured, and they end up like we said, leaving after a year or two, right? And then they transfer, and then they go to a different school, and then they're happier there, hopefully, and then it works out. But a lot of the times it takes a school or more to like understand where you really belong. So,
Yep. And I think the one thing that just came to my mind, I forgot how many years ago it was, kid announced his decision, his commitment on live TV, and his mom walked off the stage when he committed because he
yeah,
did not go where she wanted.
all
That's
that.
got to break your heart. Like maybe that's changed, but I think at the end of the day, once your parents see you playing or practicing in that jersey, they see you get that degree, it's not going to matter where you went. They'll be proud of you no matter what the heck you did. So just worry about your decision and where you ultimately want to go. Don't feel the pressures of, oh my God, I have to play at a Power 5 school. Oh, I have to play in the SEC. Oh my goodness, I got to go to this big time school. No, you don't.
Yeah.
Heck, Tom Brady was a 6th rounder, worked out, right? It was
Went to
very
Michigan
much
and
to
ended up
Michigan,
starting for a couple of years.
he wasn't playing a whole lot there. Derek Carr went to Fresno State, and Fresno State's a great Mountain West program, but they're not putting the same sentence as Alabama, LSU, and that's worked out pretty well, I would say. There's so many different examples of that stuff, so don't worry about that.
Yeah,
Just
no, I do think that. Like, I think like going back to Brady, right? Like he ended up leaving California, right? It was a tough choice, but it was the best fit, and he ended up starting. And look where he is now. He's the greatest quarterback ever. So I think sometimes the decision is sometimes the most unconventional one, but you have to take a chance every now and then. You have to like really, it's about taking a risk every now and then in life. And if you take a risk and you pick the school that might not seem like a normal choice, but then it ends up being the best one because it's like, well, I chose this school and let's see what happens. And then it ends up being the best choice, even though you didn't think it would be. So, you don't know. You
yeah,
never
test
know.
yourself. Yeah, test yourself,
Exactly.
push yourself to the limits. Don't take the easy road with it. It's not going to be easy because if you're
No.
going to take the easy road now when you're 40 and it's getting tough at a job, coaching, whatever it is, you're not going to have that experience to lean back on and toughen out by those days in college athletics where you've got a 16-hour day and it sucks getting up at 5:30 a.m. to do lifts and then film and class lifts and training and practice and study hall and everything else. Just understand it's not going to be easy, but keep that vision in your mind of what's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
I know it sounds a lot easier than it actually is when you go through those days. But again, I think like we've said and harped on, it's your choice. It's nobody else's. It's your choice of where you're going to go to college.
I mean, yeah, like you've seen like a lot of these schools that you see that they got guys that are like 6 years at like their third school, right? And then they like just I think this year there was a guy in Arizona. He went and I think he started off at George Mason, and then he went to Georgia, and then he was at Arizona, and it was like he just bounced around NCAA basketball, and he found a fit at his last school in his last year of eligibility, ability out of all places. It was the farthest away from where he's from his home. So it's like crazy how it worked out, but it worked out for him in the end. So, you know, you just at that point, it's crazy how life works out, but you just never know.
Now, how much do you think NIL should impact your college choice? How much of a factor should that play in it?
I think nowadays, unfortunately, it's a lot because these kids need, if it's a money thing, obviously money talks, as we said in the last podcast. Like,
Yeah.
if you're being offered a lot of money to play at a certain school, you absolutely should let that influence you, because it's like, hey, you earned it, right? You're being given that opportunity to get that contract deal. You should take it. You know, you're a good enough athlete to do it. Why not?
Yeah, I think it should factor into. I don't think it should be the biggest determinant. I think it should be in there though, because also factor in where's going to be the bus. Somewhere else might offer you a little bit less money with their collectives, all that other NIL stuff.
Yeah.
Even if it's a little bit less, but you think this is a place that's going to develop you more, and maybe it develops you into the right NFL player, and you can make more money in the NFL someday. Well, your
That's
long-term earnings will be better. Same with maybe a better degree, whatever it is. But I still think NIL should play an impact in it. Heck, if I was in that process, I know it would for me, especially when you're 17, 18 years old. How could that not impact anybody? It impacts you when you're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. But don't make that the end all be all. Make sure you put in the education part, your developments, the culture, and everything else.
But I'd say
And the money
NILs.
will come.
I'd say aren't NILs more of like a top player thing though? Like do all athletes get it, or is it just like the top athletes on like each sport, or like how does that go?
Now,
Like,
it depends on your following. I know you'll see other sports too outside of football. They might not be the big sport, but they've got such a big TikTok presence. They're Instagram
yeah,
famous. They'll get NIL money. Some schools, I know Miami's got a big booster that's forking out money to a lot of different players on the football team. Almost the entire roster will get a cut. For the most part, though, the big money is going to go to the big recruits. Like if you are Jaden Rashada out of Pittsburgh, I don't blame the school for whatever the reports were, but I don't blame the school for wanting to pay him. You should want that kid at your school, and he should have every right. I know he did not make the decision based on money. I know that for a fact, so I'm going to dispute all that. Of he chose it solely for the money to go to Miami, but he's earned that anyway. So you've earned that money to go somewhere. Just make it a part of your decision process, but don't make it the whole reason why you go there. That's the only advice I would really have for that.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. I do think for sure that you should not. I definitely agree that you shouldn't make it your sole decision thing, but I do think that if you are good enough to get an NIL deal, you should definitely factor that in to a good extent, only because if you're getting a certain deal from a certain school, that means that they view you in a certain way to where they want to invest in you. So I think that it's like in the NFL, right? If a team is willing to pay you a certain amount of money in a contract, they're willing to invest in you. So if a school says, hey, we'll give you this amount in an NIL, it means that they're saying you are a good enough player to where we want to give you that money in a deal because we want you here. So I think that NIL deals speak for themselves when they tell an athlete how that university like is into that player. You know, I feel like it speaks. It talks on its own. Essentially, is what I'm trying to say. Like an NIL deal, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to sum it up. Is money talks, right? And a lot of times in jobs, career-wise, it's what they're going to offer you, the raise they're going to offer you is going to speak volumes about how they value you. That's the way it is. You can like it or not, but that's the way it is. And school's going to offer a lot of money. That probably does show that they value you. That has to, right? They wouldn't be offering a lot of money if they don't see a lot of potential in you. They don't see that you can be a game changer at their school for their program, and that you've got a great future in not only college football, college athletics, baseball, basketball, softball, whatever it is, but in the pros and beyond.
Yeah, I think the good thing about like the NILs and recruiting nowadays, I think that if these athletes really want to go pro, it sets them up good for the pros in the sense where they learn, like when they get to the pros and they handle media and they handle like contract negotiations and stuff like that, right? I think that going to a school nowadays, but being able to get an NIL is essentially like getting a contract negotiation, because you have to, because you're kind of like essentially being shipped around like a free agent. I guess that's the way to put it. So I being a recruit, if you're a top recruit, free agent, the MLB's players, you're being, talked about to these schools, right? And I think the NILs are ways of saying, this is your contract offer, here you go. So I think that it sets them up to be pros because they already know how to handle these situations, and in life too, because when they have job offers and stuff, they already know how to handle this stuff. So I do think that recruiting nowadays is better in the way it sets you up, but I do think there needs to be more regulations on recruiting and transfers, because it definitely can affect the player's development and thought process when picking a school. But it's pros and cons. It's a good and a bad side. It's like Jekyll and Hyde, essentially.
Definitely. Yes, it is. And I know a lot of college coaches now are doing a great job of installing financial literacy courses just for their student athletes, where they have a meeting, maybe that's once a week, once a month, where they talk about financial literacy, how to invest your money, how to save your money, how to balance your money. I think every program should have that. I think as many high school coaches should just discuss that with their players, even if it's just for 1 hour during the season. Just go through a PowerPoint, bring in a professional accountant, financial guru, whoever it is, and just talk about how to invest your money, how to save your money, how to balance that, so you don't just lose all your money right away, but how you know how to spend it properly. And I think the same should go, maybe someday in high school, it's required to take just a 1 or 2 credit, whatever it is, financial literacy course, to where at a younger age, though, you're learning this stuff because of the way money is being so tied into everything: high school athletics, college athletics, professional athletics. Money's coming in bigger and quicker than ever before. So let's teach these next generations how to handle their money, how to invest, and how to do everything else in a smart and efficient way with cash.
You know what I think about that? I think that what they should do, they should give any athlete who has an NIL deal a financial advisor. That's what I think they should do. They should provide, or not even that. They should provide like I believe every school that obviously every D1 school has like an academic place for each athlete. I think in that center, they need to provide an advisor, a financial advisor that can help the players who have NILs with their cash, because it's important that they know that they need to invest it, or that they need to save it, so that they don't have a contract, an NIL, and blow through all their money and all that. Because I think that with an NIL and all that stuff, it's very important to just get carried away with it. And I think that a financial advisor is key, because I think a lot of NBA athletes or a lot of pro athletes have a financial advisor, because they're getting all this contract money and endorsement stuff that they need to know what to do with it and not go through it too fast. So I think a financial advisor is very key if they're going to do these NILs and keep doing them in the future. I think that every university needs to have a financial advisor. That is huge.
And with the more money that's going to come in terms of TV deals and TV rates, especially the SEC with Texas, Oklahoma going, and I know their money is big, but now with those schools going in, the deal's going to get larger. USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. A lot of these schools can hire a financial advisor full time. I know you want to put money into different things. You'll have those opportunities too, but also have a financial advisor. I also think that shows a great commitment to student athletes, because kids are a lot smarter than you think. They'll call BS when they see it. Maybe in some ways that's also the reason why they transfer more too, is because they can see that BS when they see it too, right? That just, a lot of it could be that as well. But also put that a financial advisor and make them dedicated, especially with taxes. There's so much you got to learn about taxes, especially if you're a California student athlete.
If you go to California, you're screwed with
Yeah.
that. You have so many state taxes and all that stuff. You got to learn how to deal with that for sure, especially if you go to a big school like UCLA or USC. Especially as a California kid, I know, like if you live in California, it's already expensive. So if you go to a California school and you're being offered, and you need to, because the rent costs are not cheap here in California. So like if you go to a California school, you should definitely learn how to deal with taxes, because that's going to be that's a big part of your lifestyle when you live here.
Yeah, it's just about the biggest thing out here is the taxes and the money and property taxes, how much housing costs, apartments, gas, everything else. Learn how to balance that. Create a sheet of how you balance that. I know a financial advisor go through that, a graph of what percentage should go into this, percentage to this, percentage to this, and we'll do it based on your earnings and the NIL money you make and everything else, and how much you can spend on going out a trip, whatever it is for a week. But understand that and learn the tax side of it too, because not all the money you earn is going to be yours in your pocket. There's going to be certain percentage that's going to be taxed and taken by the government. So understand that too, and how much of that check you get is actually going into your bank and the rest goes into essentials in your everyday life.
Well, it's capitalism. Well, anyway, great podcast today, everyone. That was a great show. Stay tuned on next week's show. We have a good one, so don't go anywhere. And thank you for the show.